Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Swedenborgian community online, where we dive into spiritual topics, look at scriptures across the world through a symbolic lens, and try our best to uplift each other, no matter our faith tradition, wherever we're at. And today we are talking about Daniel 1 in the Bible, the first chapter of Daniel, where we are introduced to Daniel and his captivity in Babylon. Daniel is an Israelite, so kind of one of the key people in the book of the Bible, the key vehicle for the expression of divinity often throughout Scripture from a biblical lens. And so we're going to see what Daniel might mean for us personally when we view both Babylon and Daniel in an internal way, and also on a more global scale, and see what dynamics are similar to Babylon, what dynamics are similar to Daniel, and how we can feed and nourish the Daniel within. So today our story has Daniel imprisoned with others from the Israelite nation in Babylon. And we hear this story from Daniel 1, 8 through 17. Please read it if you'd like, where Daniel refuses to consume the royal rations, it said, of food and wine, and asks instead for vegetables and water. And so we immediately get this picture of a realm that, of course, is clearly enslaving people, not doing right by communities. Often Babylon is depicted as a dominating, hurtful force that I think we can actually relate to forces in our world today and even forces within ourselves. And we have this depiction of Babylon enslaving these folks, and Daniel having the wherewithal, having the personal fortitude and strength to stand up for himself, at least when it comes to what he eats. And it actually strengthens him. It brings him into a better place within even this oppressed state, so that perhaps there's some positive movement even within this realm of Babylon. Now, I don't know about you, but I can easily kind of relate to this in today's world, where our politics, our governments, even our families, sometimes our own personal lives with work and how we might even be addicted to things, often are kind of similar to this Babylon, where we feel enslaved, we feel hurt and set upon. And I think immediately when we read this story, can't help but relate Babylon to kind of those general states in our lives of oppression, feelings of enslavement. And Daniel is that part of us that is actually not meant to be there. It's the part that truly feels enslaved because it's the healthy aspect of ourselves, the connection to divine source and God and goodness, and indeed the rest of the universe. And I think this is true no matter our tradition. We're often tasked with uplifting the healthy aspect of our lives and letting go of, releasing, not furthering, but sometimes just accepting that it's there and moving on from our own hurtful habits. I know it seems weird to say accepting that something's there and letting go of it, but in a way that's often what we need to do to find power over our addictions. It's kind of like the AA saying of accepting what you have control over and what you don't, and then turning to your higher power for the transformation. Often when we're struggling with the Babylon within and around us in such a heated, hurtful way, we find it hard to move on. I don't know if you relate to that with your own bad habits, but often when we're demonizing ourselves and we're beating ourselves up, we don't actually see much headway in terms of moving on. And although I think in a political lens, it often seems very fruitful to enter those deep battles, as we can see in the world today, that doesn't always lead to a place where we want to be at. and those maybe more bigoted, maybe more hurtful, maybe not as healthy stances in other political parties and in our own lives and in other lives don't actually get diminished by fighting against. It actually takes a type of acceptance that's willing to let go of those hurtful addictions, let them kind of dissipate back into the ether. Indeed, when we use the kind of the language and expression of the oppressors of our own oppressive states to fight our oppression, we don't find that our oppression disappears, our hurtful states disappear. When we fight violence with deep violence and anger with returned anger and poison with poison, we just see a furthering of these things. And I know often it's hard to relate to that idea because, of course, you'd want to fight the Nazis, right? You'd want to fight X, Y, or Z. But I think in times like this, especially, we start to realize that the fight begins at home. And the oppressive parts of us that scriptures like Daniel uplift to be dismissed, describe for us in these kind of symbolic terms so that we can get to know ourselves and let go of some things and embolden or feed other parts of ourselves, does that because we have to start within, and we are tasked with looking for those oppressive states within and letting them dissipate. And so when we center from those oppressive things, it's hard to get rid of them within or without. And that's what I relate to feeding Daniel vegetables and water. When we feed the Daniel within, that goodness and life at the source of our being that connects us with other beings in our environments and health, we see that Daniel grow. And we may not be able to dissipate the Babylon at first. By the end of our story, even at the end of the chapter of chapter 1 in Daniel, Babylon's still around, right? There's still a few more major beats to Daniel's story, as I'm sure many of you know. But Daniel's increasing. We see him appointed to positions of power at times. We see him uplifted and used as a symbol. And I think that happens in our own lives. When we start feeding that Daniel, looking for the source of innocence, of life, of goodness, compassion, especially in care within, and feeding it, turning more towards it, realizing that we're more at peace in it, that we're actually happier in it. The more we can let go of our judgments, our, oh, shut up, even to the worst of what people say, we tend to have this dismissive, hurtful, shrug and aura. And actually, I think that furthers what we don't like in some of those other people's states. It furthers the tyranny. It furthers dismissiveness and uncare. And so in a way, even when whoever it is for you says something despicable, looking for the Daniel within, maybe even visualizing that person as your child or as your mother, father, etc., someone you deeply care about. If they were that person in your life, would you treat them as dismissively, even if they're the worst of beings, right? Even if they seem to be the biggest monsters in history, Hitler or what have you. What if that were your son? There'd be a little bit more compassion, although you'd want to shut him down, right? And I think we have to do that with ourselves. Some of us have really hurtful habits that really harm other people and end up harming us. We're not in the most peaceful state. We're not very happy with ourselves. And when we beat ourselves up, when we self-flagellate or whatever it's called, like whip our own backs, it doesn't actually stop that behavior. We continue doing it, and then we're beating ourselves up all the time. We feel guilty all the time. We're depressed. We actually see that in a recent study around pornography use in men, that men who have a certain idea of porn as just this dastardly, Babylonian deed that they have to beat themselves up about, are way more depressed and way more likely to continue with the habit than actually the people who take a more accepting, look at themselves and say, you know what, this habit started for whatever reason, maybe many reasons. I wasn't feeling connected. It started when I was young. I felt ostracized, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever the excuses are, but just more accepting. They found that they were less depressed, and they also were more willing to walk past it, saying, because I'm not so caught up in this kind of reactivity, beat myself up, hide it, etc. I'm freer. I can kind of accept that it's happened in the past, no longer dwell on it, no longer look for it in my head, kind of looking for the desire to do it. Often we do that with our bad habits. We don't even have the feeling of wanting it at times, but then we look for it, oh, don't I usually have this feeling that I want this thing? Where is it? Oh, there it is. And then we go do it. So just letting go and accepting how we have been, and no longer villainizing ourselves. I know, easier said than done, especially when it comes to other people, other countries, etc. There's people in our lives that have really hurt us. And so starting to feed the Daniel even when it relates to them, to feed Daniel the healthy things in life, the water, the vegetables, and letting the Babylon slowly kind of take a back seat and Daniel to rise up. And as we eventually see with the story of Daniel, divinity, God, Allah, whatever you want to call the deep seat of consciousness that furthers the universe, wins out. And I think that will be true for each of us. We just have to find some patience for ourselves. So yeah, I relate this also to a story that my partner, Alyssa, my fiance, Alyssa often points to, and she actually has this really beautiful tattoo on her forearm with it. You can see her in that tattoo in some of our past videos where she dances, which has been a wonderful offering for us. And the tell is around the two wolves. And many of us have heard this in one way or not, but the source of it seems to be out of the Cherokee Nation, of the indigenous peoples of North America. And we hear this story of a young man talking to his grandfather and saying, I have this battle going on within myself between two wolves, is how it appears to me in my dreams. A good wolf and an evil wolf. And the evil wolf is full of envy, malice, sorrow, hate, guilt, anger, bigotry, dismissiveness, shallowness, lust, and on, right? And the good wolf is full of compassion, care, wisdom, patience, love, a willingness to forgive, a willingness to not get ahead of themselves but stay in the moment, and a deep and vast openness to what happens. Now, which of those two wolves in my life, grandfather, will win out in this fight? I also see it in other people, and it deeply troubles me. And the grandfather responds with just this: the one you feed. So we're each tasked to feeding the Daniel within. And let us now turn to a few moments of a reflection, where we just close our eyes if we're willing, or just take a moment to notice our breath, to notice the thoughts that come, but let them dissipate. Don't follow the thoughts, whether it's judgment about yourself or others, whether it's any type of meditation on a topic. Let it come, but let it go. Just feeling the breath.
down south over Chelsea Lake. He was a real gone man. She pulled him up out of a hole. He helped her feet meet the ground. But time reversed the poles, and he lost anchor while she drowned. Don't wait for her, Percy Jones, she's gone. Don't wait for her, Percy Jones, she's gone. They built a house on a hill, long days and warm nights. With just enough rice to fill. Wrong ways and cold fights. And she's just a kid. She don't know what is right. And he's just a kid. He don't know how to put down the fight. How to put down the fight. His voice brings her home, but his tone puts her fire out. And all the love in the world only equates to a drop of doubt.